Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai, Bombay, it is my pleasure to welcome all the dignitaries, esteemed faculty, students, and guests to the Professor N.R. Kamath Distinguished Institute Lecture. We are truly honored to have a distinguished scholar, engineer, and musician with us today, Dr. Arun Dravid, who will be speaking on the fascinating topic of science and musical notes, sur and shrutis. To begin, let us take a moment to honor the legacy of Professor N.R. Kamath, a visionary and pioneer whose contribution continue to inspire us. Please direct your attention to the screen for a short video presentation.
The chemical engineering profession and teaching in India has been uniquely blessed by the benevolent touch of an illustrious guru, Professor N.R. Kamath. N.R.K. took up the position of Deputy Director in 1960. As the Deputy Director of the Institute in the early formative years, Professor Kamath held the center stage and undertook the yeoman task of setting the framework and processes to streamline the running of academic programs. He was credited for drafting the Institute's earliest academic offerings and considered the father of all academic things, who strode the Institute corridors with the rules of his tongue. For many students, Professor Kamath was the inspiration that set them on the road to success. For some other students, his shoulders were the ones on which they rested their problems. For many young faculty, he was the ultimate mentor and role model. For the underdogs, he was their champion. For the institution, he was the epitome of an educationalist par excellence. Gurus such as Professor N.R. Kamath help shape great institutions and bless the individuals in it with the priceless and sublime gift of knowledge that sustains over several generations. Thanks, Professor N.R. Kamath, for this priceless gift of knowledge and pioneering mentorship. You will always, forever, live in our hearts.
I now invite Professor Kalyapan sir Professor in the Department of Chemistry and Dean Strategy, to formally welcome our speaker and share a brief overview of Professor N.R. Kamath's remarkable journey. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to welcome our distinguished guest today, Dr. Arun David. He not only excelled in the field of chemistry, but also in classical music. He started his academic career from IIT Bombay. He did his BTech in chemical engineering way back in 1962 to 66. He was awarded the President of India Gold Medal for standing first among all branches in BTech. His academic journey continued, and then he went for master's and doctorate at MIT, and there too he achieved a remarkable straight A, a GPA of 5. And his career is really illustrious. He has been the recipient of several prestigious awards. Hindustan Lever Award as the most outstanding chemical engineer of the year in 1984, and the NOCL Award for excellence in process development in 1987, the Godrej Award for lifetime achievement in chemical engineering in 2018. So he has a distinguished career with Jacobs Engineering, a globally renowned engineering company, where he retired as the chairperson of Jacobs Engineering in India in 2009. Currently, he holds the position of chairman emeritus there. And he has contributed equally in other academia as well, serving as an external member of the IIT Senate and teaching as visiting faculty at both IIT Bombay and ICT Mumbai. So what is unique about Dr. David is he is also equally accomplished in music. He is a highly accomplished vocalist of the Jaipur Atropali Gharana. His musical journey began under the guidance of Ustad Abdul Majid Khan Sahib, and later with Jnana Saraswati Srimati Kishori Amonkar, one of the most cherished vocalists of the Jaipur Gharana. He has cultivated a unique style that balances the Baba dominant approach of his guru with the structural beauty of the traditional Jaipur Gayak. He has performed over 100 concerts in India and 55 in the USA, enthralling audiences with his mastery of Hindustani classical music. He is not just limited to classical music, but also brings equal charm to light classical forms like Tumris and Marathi Nitya Sangeet and Natya Sangeet. He has explored the world of cinema, featuring in the Netflix film The Disciple, showcasing his versatility yet again. Now he is settled in Mumbai. He continues to contribute to the world of music by teaching advanced disciples and occasionally engaging in freelance consulting work for Indian companies. Dr. David, it's really a pleasure to welcome you to IIT Bombay. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Presented the video files of so the video files are all there.
At the end, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So once
Where are the video files? On
there's a
the
folder here.
file manager. Okay. If you need any help, you'll be around.
I'm there.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm going to use this side of the screen for my pointer. I can't point on both the screens at the same time, as you know. So those of you in that corner find it a little hard. You might sit on this side. It's okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity of sharing my thoughts with you on the subject. Can you all hear me well? Mic is not working.
You just need to keep it a little up. That's it.
Yeah, that's okay.
Can you say something, sir?
Hello. Is it any better? Everybody can hear? No? I think you have to increase your own system volume. Otherwise, I can hold that, if that's better.
Hello. Okay, sir.
Yeah, I can hold it. Hello? Can they move this?
Hello.
But then my pointer.
No, the pointer is different.
Oh, this is. No, that is needed for the pointer. No? No? IIT.
You are testing your volume.
It's working, so I don't need this. Thank you. Anybody who can't hear me now? Is it audible to the back of the hall? Yeah. All right, good. Thank you for letting me come here and share my thoughts. Today, as you have all heard, I've run two parallel careers in my life. I refrained from the third one, which was knocking on the door after I did that one film, which was very strenuous. So I've decided not to engage into a third career. Anyway, a brief introduction for my interaction with Professor Kamath, my very first interaction with Professor Kamath. I have held Professor Kamath in the greatest of esteems throughout my whole life, not just while I was a student here, but later many times I was a regular visitor to his house, and I have had the usual tea and bhajiyas with him and his sweet wife Rosena during my career later for many years. So I feel very privileged today to talk about Professor Kamath. The very first occasion where Professor Kamath and I had an interaction was when I was admitted to IIT, Chemical Engineering Department. As in those days, we joined the second year after InterScience, and then it was a 4-year course after second year, from second year. And at that time, I was already in serious music training with my second guru, Gana Saraswati Kishori Amonkar. And although I was living in Mumbai, as a home in Mumbai, the strict rule of this being a residential campus, the students were not allowed to go to Mumbai. You had to remain here at the campus on every weekend. And there was a big dilemma: how am I going to continue my musical training? So I was really in turmoil what to do about it. I didn't want to just give it up. So I approached Professor Kamath, who was then the head of the department and deputy director. And by the way, the director was Brigadier Bose. Being from the army, an extremely disciplinarian person, and you can imagine him, or I could not even imagine him giving me permission to go to Mumbai not just once in a while, but every weekend. So, but Professor Kamath said, I'll do some groundwork, you go and meet him. So I went and met Professor Brigadier Bose. He was not a professor, he was a brigadier from the army, Brigadier Bose. And I begged and pleaded with him to say, sir, this is my situation. So he said, you've just come into IIT. I said, yes, sir. What did you do before? I said, I passed Inter-Science from Bombay University. Now it is called 12th standard, but in those days it used to be called Inter-Science. So how did you do in your Bombay University? So I said, sir, humbly, I stood first in the university. Then it's all the more reason to deny your request. Oh, should I have said I flunked it? So he then said, no, I'm very strict. Rules are rules. Everybody will start coming to me and say, this is my reason, that is my reason. Am I going to ask people to go to Mumbai on weekends, all of them? So I said, sir, what are your conditions? What should I do for which you will say, okay, continue your music? Now I feel very humble to say, he said to me that, okay, you've been a topper up to your previous education. And today, I think your class of chemical engineering, you are at the top of the class. But my condition is that during the next 4 years until you do your BTech, your first rank in the class must never miss. The day you lose your first rank in the class, your music training stops. I'll tell you, I'm not making up a story. This is what exactly happened that day. So I was absolutely petrified. He said, how can I assure this is going to happen? But I said, well, what do I have to lose? Go on until the time I lose my rank. At the worst, my music will stop. So with God's grace, music never stopped, and I graduated from IIT. Anyway, so.
And not only that,
Sorry?
not only that, furthermore, he taught it in Caltech also.
Oh, well, yeah. So I will now get into the other part of my career, the music career. And today, this is a very unusual occasion for me to talk on music. I normally enjoy performing concerts, of which I have done about 150 in my life so far. And the song that you heard just now in the beginning, that shlo about the Guru, that was in my voice. The science of musical notes. This is a subject which, by the way, let me first of all ask before I proceed, raise your hands. How many of you are either singers of classical music or are students of classical music? Well, that's quite a few. I didn't expect so many. Thank you. So, we as students of music, classical music, we attend our guru's training sessions and we learn all there is to learn about the sur, the tal, the lay, the rag, the bandish, the badhat, the tan, you name it. All the angas, the ashtanga as they call them, of khayal gaiki music. But in this Guru Shishya Parampara type training, hardly ever a thought is given to where does this all come from? Where do our notes originate? how is my voice, as if it's an instrument, sing all these notes? What is their root cause? What is their fundamental principle by which we make a musical sound? So today's lecture is on the question of what are the surs and shrutis of our music. So this is a little outline of my lecture today. I will have a brief introduction to the science of musical sounds. And then number 2,
Change the slide.
yeah, I still change the slides. With this I can change the slide, right? Back and forth.
No problem.
There is no. Where is the right click, left click?
Yeah.
Oh, these are
No,
like.
but it's not changing.
No, I know what I can do. I just point it here and double click, then it will come up.
Once again. Come out now.
Sorry.
And then go into present mode. Why is it not present?
Can you turn it off and turn it on again? 1 minute.
You
One
double
minute.
click, right?
No, 1 minute.
Three. It will come.
It's happening.
It will come. It will come. Searching for process.
Okay.
Check it
So now,
with the pointer. Yeah.
This is forward, this is backward.
all right, and then this is the pointer, right?
Yeah.
Where is it?
This is the
This is the pointer.
Yeah.
All right. Since my pointer is in my right hand, I'll. Okay. So this is the outline. So, secondly, then, typical waveforms of musical sounds and frequencies of notes. Now, some of this stuff is really very elementary physics and little bit of mathematics, ratio proportions, nothing very sophisticated. So I think all the students should be very, very easy with this one. Concept of the octave, as we say in our musical system, we have these 7 basic notes and then 5 varieties of their sharp and komal and tivra notes. So what is the concept of an octave? Octave is saptak. In Marathi or Sanskrit they call it a saptak. So the concept of it. And then the definition of the notes in a octave, that is sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa, we all have heard of that. Sa ni dha pa ma ga re sa. Those are 7 notes. Sa re ga ma pa dha ni, and then sa is repeated at the top, so which is 7 notes. And then in addition to that, there are the komal and the tivra varieties of each of these notes, which is together with the basic notes plus the tivra and komal varieties make it a 12 note octave. Total there are therefore 12 notes. Number 5, I'll go a little bit further and explain to you. We traditionally musicians talk about 22 shrutis, 12 notes, well known, but then there are also so-called quote unquote 22 shrutis. That means apart from the main notes, near every note there are some lower and higher frequency variants which we call shrutis. Now why 22? Why not 103? Why not 17? Why only 22? What's the logic behind 22? So I'll examine that, explain to you why it is only 22. Towards the end of the lecture, I will talk about the Western scale of the octave. That is the American, British, European scale. And in fact, some of our instruments, like the harmonium, have come from the West. India never had anything called a harmonium before the British came here. So our system of notes is different from the Western system of notes, although from the base note of Sa, let's say the fundamental note of Sa, to the upper Sa of that same octave, in which we have 12 main notes and 22 Shrutis. The same range of notes is also in a harmonium or a piano, which is the Western system. But then the in-between notes, sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa, or do re mi fa sol la ti, in the Western scale they call them do re mi fa sol la ti, that is sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa. The frequencies of each of those notes, and first of all, to those of you who haven't studied physics very intently, sound is, any musical sound has a certain frequency. Any note that you either sing or play has a frequency. A frequency means that if you have a string taut nicely between two pegs and you strike it, it makes a sound. That sound is a musical sound. And then, depending on how tight you turn it, what's the tension on the string, depending on how thick the string is, depending on how long the string is, all of these factors determine which note you hear. The lower note, higher note, middle note, which note do you hear? It depends on all these factors. And the string is vibrating hundreds of times per second. And the number of times it vibrates in 1 second is called its frequency. This is very, very basic. Most of you already know this. But to lay the groundwork for what follows, I'm just introducing these very, very fundamental basic things. And the Western scale of music, how are the frequencies attached to each note is different from how are those frequencies attached to our system of the octave. And why, therefore, does it make a difference? If you buy, or if you have a harmonium, you buy a harmonium in England or France and play, you will find slightly besura, all the notes. Therefore, in our music, the harmonium is not acceptable unless it is specially tuned for our system and our frequencies of the notes of our octave. All right, I'll come to that little more detail later. And then I'll have some concluding remarks at the end. Now, a very simple diagram, assume that there is a string, a wire between two ends, and it's nicely taut, and there is a tension. This wire in the uppermost, okay, it shows, you see this little loop, that's the positions of the wire as it vibrates. And that wire will when you strike the wire, it will vibrate. It's highly exaggerated. It doesn't vibrate with that kind of an amplitude. Okay, it's just a schematic. So it will vibrate hundreds of times a second, and that is what produces a sound wave of the sound. Very simple formula for the frequency of the sound produced by shock. Here, yes. Simple formula. Let's say the frequency of a note is n. That depends on 1 upon 2L times square root of T, which is the tension of the string, and M equal to mass per unit length of the string. I think for engineering students, I don't need to go further into detail. So T is the tension. In CGS system, we define as dynes. M equal to mass, that is grams per cc. No, not just M is the I'll come back to M later, but L is the length. And the variable M has to do with the material density. So it is grams divided by the volume. It's just the density of the material of the string. On that formula, you determine the frequency with which that string will vibrate. Its length, for the time being the tension, and let's assume these things are constant, we are not going to vary these. The only thing we are going to vary is the length L. So if you vary the length L, you see the remaining four figures there. So what we are doing here is, let us say the topmost figure there is the what we call the Pramukh Sa. It's the frequency. Right now I'm not defining what frequency it is. It could be 100, it could be 150, depending on you have a female voice or a male voice. When you say Sa, a female singing Sa in Kalichar sings it at 206 hertz. Hertz is cycles per second. So that string is vibrating 206 times in each second to produce the note Sa of a female voice singing in Kalichar. Now if I put a little support in the middle of the string and then pluck it, then it will pluck in two parts of the two parts of the string will vibrate at the same time. But if you see this formula, if the length is halved, the frequency will be doubled. So the second figure there shows what would happen if I reduce the length by half. The reduced length will vibrate twice as fast as the upper one. So instead of the lower Sa, that will vibrate at the upper Sa note. And extending the same logic 3 times, if you have 2 supports in the middle and the length, each part is 1/3 of the original length, then each of these 3 parts will vibrate at 3 times the frequency of the top one. So the top one is 100 hertz, that is 100 cycles per second. The second one would be 200. The third one would be 300 cycles per second frequency of vibration. Likewise, the fourth one, we call it Atitar Sa, 4 times the frequency. And the fifth one is 5 times the original frequency. The original frequency was 100. The fifth, if I support the string in 4 different places and create 5 different parts, equal parts, it will vibrate at 500. Compared with the first one, the last one, if the first one sounds like a sa, the last one will sound like a ga, but of not the next octave, but the octave afterwards. And that note was traditionally from Vedic times defined by Bharata Muni as the Swayambhu Gandhar. Gandhar because it's the ga, but it was 2 octaves later because the frequency is very, very high, 5 times. So each time your frequency goes up by a factor of 2, you are going from 1 octave to the next octave. So if this sa is 100, first figure, by halving the length, the sa goes to 200, so that is the upper sa. And if you go to 4, you will go to a sa which is even further in the next octave. So this is how the basic notes are dependent on the tension. Tension is constant, mass is constant, we are only changing length here. And the same thing happens to human voice. After all, how is human voice produced? We have 2 little muscles here, and when we sing, the muscles are vibrating inside, just like the string is vibrating. And when these muscles are vibrating at a certain frequency, let's say 207 hertz per second, and that's exactly the figure for Kalichar. Kalichar, we call it Kalichar because on the harmonium, the black and white strips. So the 4th black strip is Kalichar. So that has a frequency, happens to have a frequency of 207 cycles per second or hertz. So our voice is vibrating like this. And it goes to the upper sa, it will vibrate at 414, which is twice 207. So this is very basic of how musical sounds are produced. It all depends on the vibration, the length of the vibrating element, the tension. If I increase the tension, also the note will go up. If I change the mass per centimeter of the string, if I use a thicker string, I get a lower by square root of the mass. I get a lower octave. All right, so this is very basic to what I'm going to discuss a little later. Here I have drawn a little diagram to show here is the sa, my basic sa. Then we have 12 notes here. I'll show you how. This is basic sa, then komal re, shuddha re, komal ga, shuddha ga, ma, tivra ma, pa, komal dha, shuddha dha, komal ni, shuddha ni, and sa, upper sa. So you see, from 1:1 ratio, we go to 2:1. So this sa and that sa are exactly 2 times the frequency. One of the 3, the tarpa, as you say here, see here, the third drawing there shows 3 parts of the string, where let's say if the first part has a frequency of 100, I said the third one would be 300. But since 300 goes beyond 200, double of 100 is 200, which is, if this is the sa, the double would be the sa of the upper sa. And then we go to 300, it will go even beyond the upper sa into the next note. That next note happens to be, at 300 frequency, happens to be the pa of the tar saptak. So what would be its frequency in my saptak? In the next saptak, it is 300. So for that same pa in my saptak would be half of that, which is 150. So sa is 100, pa is 150, and the upper sa is 200. You see how these frequencies are determined? It's simple physics. Physics of a taut string vibrating. Whether it's the voice, sarangi, tambura, sitar, physics is the same for all of it, even for the human voice. Now let's go to Atitarasa, which is, I don't need to spend time on that. It is the sa of yet further octave. So from 100, I go to 400 frequency. And then the fifth one is 500, which I have defined as the Swayambhu Gandhar. Now let me give you a little background of what is Swayambhu Gandhar. Some of you, hopefully all of you who are learning music, are learning with a tambura and not with the harmonium. I hope and pray. Because to learn Indian Hindustani music with the harmonium is the most atrocious thing you can do. Stop it if you are doing it, start using a tambura. Many of you may have understood or heard when a tambura is well tuned, that means it has 4 strings, pa, sa, and the kharja sa. 4 strings on a tambura. If the tambura is extremely well tuned and you play the kharja, that's the lower sa, the 4th string of a tambura, after about 2 or 3 seconds, you will hear a very, very shrill, soft ga coming out of the tambura. I hope you have heard this. I hope you have this experience. Okay? Why does this sound ga? There is no ga in the tambura. There is no ga tar in the tambura. There are no frets like sympathetic strings which you have in a sarangi or sitar or sarod. There are no sympathetic strings, just the 4 basic strings on tambura. Yet, when you play the last string, which is the kharja, you will hear a shrill sound of ga of 2 octaves later. It's not the ga of this octave. That's the miracle of science, miracle of physics. Because when that string is struck, without having any physical barriers to break it into 5 or 4 different parts, that string, when vibrating, divides itself into 4 or 5 parts. And this is the miracle of our tambura strings. Not just tambura strings, but any taut string, when you strike it, it automatically creates those harmonics. We call them harmonics. And that is why you are a keen listener and a well-tuned tanpura, you will hear from the kharja a very shrill, sharp gandhar coming out. And I'll go into more of that as we proceed. Okay. Coming back to this, we have therefore seen here that I have defined for you sa and then pa. You see these figures, ratio to sa. Can you see the lettering from the back? It may be a little hard to read this, but this is sa, and I call it a hypothetically frequency of 1. It could be 100, it could be 200, anything. But to keep the number simple, let me call it 1. Okay, sa is a frequency of 1. Upper sa is the frequency of 2, and then here is pa. That's the frequency of 3 halves. If 100 gave rise to 300 with 3 parts of the thing, but that 300 went beyond the range of 200, so if you halve it, 300 by 2 is 150, which is a ratio of 1.5 times the sa. So that becomes pa. Now let's see if we can fix some of the other notes. Logic, pure logic. You don't need to be a musician to understand this. If you're a physics student or math student, you will understand. Here we have fixed sa as 1, pa as 3.5, and ga as 5/4. Remember, the ga was 500, which is the last thing, but it was in 2 octaves later. So to go back to the original octave, you divide twice by 2, and you come back to, so from here, 500 divided by 2 divided by 2, that means 500 by 4. So compared with the sa of 100, this would be 500 by 4. That is compared with 1, this is 5/4. So sa is 1. 5/4, as I said, was called Swayambhu Gandhar because Bharata Muni noticed it. And it's written in the thick text that Bharat Muni wrote. He was around between 500 BC and 300 AD, more than 2000 years ago. And there is the mention of Swayambhu Gandhar in Bharata Muni's Natya Shastra. And that is this note, ga, 5/4. I showed you why it is 5/4. And by the way, these are all relative frequencies. Nothing really in life, nothing vibrates at 1 cycle per second. It won't make any noise, any sound. So, but given that sa is a frequency, could be 100, could be 100, could be 200, whatever. The whole idea of our system of notes in an octave is ratios. All the notes with respect to each other bear ratios to each other, and these ratios are determined by the physics of how they vibrate. Now, Bharata Muni, 2000 years ago, I think we all know that India was very advanced in mathematics at Vedic times, or even beyond Vedic, after Vedic times, 2000 years ago. And therefore, they must have had a good understanding of the physics of vibrating strings. How that ga is determined, I'll show you a little while later why the Western tuned harmonium will not play that same Swayambhu Gandhar as our Hindu Indian system defines that note. Most of you must have heard the term Gandhar tuned harmonium. Vocalists, good vocalists, will always insist on using Gandhar tuned harmonium. What does that mean? That means that The standard harmonium Gandhar is not acceptable. They have to have specially tuned Gandhar to correct the frequency to what we arrive here through these calculations. Little more on that becomes clear. Actually, it's a little misnomer to say a Gandhar tuned harmonium is good. Not enough. You have to have Madhyam tuned, Dhaivat tuned, Rishabh tuned also. Because all those frequencies by our system of mathematical and physical system of calculation are slightly different from the frequencies you get by a Western system of calculating these notes. How? I will come back. So let me go to this slide where I'm trying to now define what is the frequency of Ma. We said Sa was 1, upper Sa was 2, and Pa was 3 halves, 3 divided by 2. So let's come to Ma. And it's a simple matter of logic. If Ma was treated as Sa, as if the Ma's frequency, I'm treating that as a Sa. Okay? Let me go back to that. Here is a Ma. If this is my Sa and that is my Pa, Pa is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 notes higher from Sa. Imagine this to be a harmonium. So if this is Sa, then Komal Re, Shuddha Re, Komal Ga, Shuddha Ga, Ma is 5th and Pa is 7th. Okay? So with respect to Sa, Ma is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now with respect to Pa, if I go 5 more notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I go to upper Sa. So that means if I treat that as the Sa, that would become a Pa. Is that clear? So if that is 3.5 times this, what is this? 4 upon 3. Simple arithmetic. Oh, where's my duster? Yeah. So Ma times 3.5. Why? Because from Ma I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes. So that is like going from Sa, 7 notes, I go to Pa. So Ma times 3.5 is equal to 2. Okay, so from 1 I go to 3.5, which is Pa, and from Ma I go another 3.5 to go to upper Sa. So Ma will be equal to Sa. Let's say Ma is Ma, M. From 1 to go, M is the frequency of Ma, and then if I multiply m by per is 3.5, I get 2, which is upper sa. Understand? Okay. Therefore, m equals 4/3. So what this means is that if sa has a frequency of 1, upper sa has a frequency of 2, and per has a frequency of 3/2, m will have a frequency of 4/3. Simple logic. Likewise, by the same logic, upper ray, let's go back there. Here is ray, sorry. Here is my note ray. Okay, I go from here and I want to go to the upper ray. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So obviously 12 nodes from lower ray, I go to upper ray. Now, if I go from per is what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 nodes from sa is per. Now, I treat per as my sa and go 7 nodes on top of that. Where do I go? From here I count 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I will go to the ray if I treat per as my sa and add another per to it, I'll go to ray. So, ray will be equal to 3.5 times 3.5, 9/4. So there we have 9/4, therefore, is the frequency of ray with respect to sa as 1. But where is that 9/4 ray, which is in the next octave? This, remember, was the upper sa of this sa from 1 to 2, and then I went further so the next octave ray was 9/4. Therefore, for this octave ray had to be 9/8. Anything which is in the next octave, for this octave you have to divide by 2. So sa is 1, ray is 9/8, ga is 5/4, ma is 4/3, per is 3/2. I'm not going to do these calculations for the, ni and all, but the process is the same. So believe me, if you do this, you will get, we just calculated here, ray is 9/8. By the same process, dha will be calculated as 5/3 and shuddha ni will be calculated as 15/8. This way, all the shuddha notes of the octave, sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni, and sa, they are all fixed. 1, 9/8, 5/4, 4/3, 3/2, 5/3, 15/8, and 2/1. These are sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni, sa, shuddha notes. By the same logic, you can similarly derive, we have no time to I can show you, but I have no time for that. As I said here, fixed, flat and sharp notes, komal and tibra notes. There is a logic, you can use that same logic to come up with their frequencies. So finally we have all the notes frequencies defined with respect to sa as 1. This is something which our Rishi Munis 2000 years ago pretty much knew. And in between, the next 1500, 2000 years, we kept singing very, very eminent Buzurga singers happened from Mia Tansen all the way down. But hardly any people have really understood the physics and the maths that define all these notes. But this is how they are defined. Pure logic and laws of physics. Now, there is a very eminent scientist by the name of Dr. Paritosh Pandya. He used to work for Tata Institute of Fundamentals, TIFR at Colaba, and he is currently adjunct professor here at IIT Bombay. He did a lot of research on our system of Hindustani system of notes. He assembled a very sophisticated, and his work was done at TIFR, by the way, not here at IIT. That was his previous job, Tata Institute. He assembled a very sophisticated equipment. And what he did was analogous to the way we break sun rays into 7 colors. Remember high school physics? Take a prism, put white light through the prism, you get a spectrum. And it's not just 7, it's infinite numbers. But prominently you can say VIB, GYOR. An analog of this system, the way light is broken up by a prism. He created an instrument called a spectroscope, through which what he did was, he took a nicely tuned tanpura and played it just once, pa, sa, 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 just once. And whatever sound came, he subjected that sound through his spectrometer. And I won't go through this here. This is the interesting thing. And furthermore, what he did was, by the way, the system of analyzing sound like a prism analyzes sunlight, the system of analyzing sound digitally is called fast Fourier transforms. Any people from applied mathematics here? No one from applied mathematics? Okay. Okay, fine, I'm glad. So you've heard of fast Fourier transform, FFT. It's a great technique. With the fast Fourier transform, now see what miracle has happened. What Paritosh Pandya did was, when he analyzed just one plucking of, it's a lower section, one cycle of tanpura plucking, you see that bottom line? Just one cycle of tanpura plucking. He didn't pluck it second time, just one, and he measured what happened. This is what he got. I'll explain what this is. X-axis is the frequency in hertz. So this graph is a 3-dimensional graph. This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis, and this is the z-axis. The heights are z-axis. So, and furthermore, what he did was, he completely masked, removed the frequencies that came from the 4 strings themselves. So, pa, sa, 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 they would have just overwhelmed this thing because they were so strong. He wanted to mask them out. He masked them out, and he then wanted to see what does remain. What remains is this. I'll explain what this is. Now, as I said, x-axis is the frequency. So this, he found that apart from those main notes which he has masked, he has removed, the tanpura produced all these different sounds of different frequencies. All these notes were produced by the tanpura, which a human ear cannot hear except for the Swayambhu Gandhar, and I have personally heard sometimes the Swayambhu Rishabh. Except for these two, I have never heard anything else. Now, if this goes all the way from frequency of 100 all the way to 1200 hertz, and by the way, this scale, y-axis, these are rapid fire photos, rapid fire frames of what output he got. So each one of them, and he has got what, 1000 frames. There are, each one of them frames produced a sine wave, each one of them. So in short, this is like an equivalent to a time scale. The 1000 rapid fire frames correspond to roughly 5 minutes. So many of these frequencies, many of these frequencies, you can see, lasted for, sorry, not 5 minutes, 5 seconds. So many of these secondary, or shall I say, resonant frequencies that came out of the tanpura lasted for a good 4 to 5 minutes. And what frequency do you see here prominently? You see here prominently, I'm not going to talk about all of them. Here is the frequency if you look at this frequency here, this big frequency here, 515, it exactly comes to 515. And by the way, he started with 103 as the base note of the tanpura, kharja note, and then 206 was the jod note, that is sa and sa, and then kharja was 103. So what he noticed was that in this spectrogram, he found that he had big peaks at 515, at 620, this is a 620 frequency, this is the 515 frequency. He likewise also saw a 773 frequency, which is this one. And I'll explain what that is. And then finally, he saw this 932 frequency here. There are others also, I'm not going to talk about because these are upper harmonics. Let's just focus on, keep it a little simple. 515, remember these numbers, 620, 773, and 932. These, if you really think about it, these are all Swayambhu notes. These are all, why Swayambhu? They came out of nowhere from the tanpura. Tanpura only had sa, pa, sa, and kharja. It didn't have any of these frequencies. No wire was tuned in the tanpura to any of these frequencies, they just came out. So the word Swayambhu, it's not just a Gandhar that is Swayambhu. A tanpura gives rise to many Swayambhu notes. So, sa, ga, pa, and ni. Here, the uppermost line I've said here, sa, ga, pa, and ni are recognized as Swayambhu, of which only ga is mentioned in Bharata Muni's Natya Shastra. Bharata Muni does not recognize any of the other Swayambhu notes, but he does recognize ga as a Swayambhu Gandhar. Therefore, everybody knows about Swayambhu Gandhar, but no one talks about Swayambhu, Swayambhu, Pancham, Swayambhu, Rishabh, and Swayambhu Nishad. Okay, it's a revelation thanks to Paritosh Pandya's research. Now here is in the example, Dr. Pandya used 103 Hertz as his base frequency. We will never find 103 in a real Tanpura that we use. Kali 4 are given here. What are commonly used frequencies in our Tanpuras? Ladies use Kali 4 or Kali 5. Kali 4 is 103 Hertz, Kharj. But Kali 4, the real Kali 4 is 207, its Kharj is 103, Kali 5 is 233, and for men, C sharp, which is Kali 1, is 139 Hertz, and D sharp, which is Kali 2, is 156 Hertz. This is just for your knowledge to understand in perspective where is 103, 206, and some of these other frequencies in relation to normally where we tune our Tanpuras. But the important thing is that Swayambhu notes, there are 4, not just 1. And as I said, Swayambhu Gandhar, that first peak I showed you, 515, I said, look at 515, 620, 773, and 930. These are the Swayambhu Gandhar, Swayambhu Pancham, Swayambhu Nishad, and Swayambhu Rishabh. Pure physics of plucking a string, doesn't matter if it's a Tanpura or sitar or sarod. You remove all the tarafs from the sitar and subject it to the spectrogram analysis, you will still see this. But sitar is a bad example because it's got frets. Sarod is a better example. Human voice is the best example. We don't hear the Swayambhu Gandhar, we don't hear the Swayambhu, but it is coming out, I assure you. If you sat in front of a spectrometer and subject your voice to this analysis, you will see these coming out of your own voice. You never hear them. This is the beauty of science, physics, as it interacts with music. And these Swayambhu Gandhar, if the base sa is 103, upper sa is the second octave. First octave is 103 Hertz, second octave is 206, double of that. And Swayambhu notes, all except the last one here, these are in the third octave. This one is in the fourth octave, because after the second octave ends at 400. First octave is 100 to 200, second octave is 200 to 400, and third octave is 400 to 800, every time double. So these frequencies fall into third octave, third octave, third octave. This is a little mistake here. It goes right into the fourth octave. And that note is produced by the Tanpura in the fourth octave. The other ones, these three are produced in the third octave, and this is produced in the upper sa is upper sa. So our perception of notes that we sing is not as simple as sa pa pa sa, sa re ga ma pa da ni sa. It's not as simple as that. Hidden behind all those, our mother physics and our grandmother mathematics have all played a role in creating Swayambhu notes which are not detected by the human ear, but which now the machine has detected. Now I'm going to talk about the Western scale. You've understood how complex our Indian system of music is, and it all boils down to creating ratios of one note to the other And the fundamental reasoning behind, logic behind the ratios is the physics of oscillation of the strings. So it is the physics and then the mathematics combined together gives us our entire spectrum of notes, including Komal and Tivra notes, their exact positions frequency-wise. Therefore, if a sarangi player wants to accompany you as a vocalist, can he tune 10, 12 notes or 7 notes to the specific frequencies that our system requires? And what do you do with a harmonium? At best, you will be very proud. Hey, I have got a Gandhar tuned harmonium. I'll play with you. Oh, good, good. Gandhar tuned is only one of the 4. So, very few people know this, but this is the fact. And it doesn't matter for a common listener. Sounds very good. Who cares what the subtle frequency differences are? But a trained musician will frown. हे तुझा गांधार बेसूर आहे. हे तुझा धवत बेसूर वाजतो. You understand Marathi, I hope. Okay. Now coming to the Western scale. Oops, I'm sorry. I always forget this. Will somebody help me put this back on me? Oh, everybody's disappeared. It's a good thing. Hello? Can you hear? No, I'm going to put it in my pocket. Can you hear me now? Can you hear? Now. Man, it's getting late, huh? I'll finish in about 10 minutes. What the Western system does, okay, now I'll draw a long line here. Here is our saw, and here is the upper saw. All right, we have defined re, ga, ma, pa, dha, nis, etc., and their Komal and Tivra varieties. So let's say this frequency is 103. That would be 206. What did the Western people do? And by the way, Beethoven and Mozart have been around, what, 1,000, 1,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, I don't know. But similar period that our music has been around. What they did had nothing to do with physics or mathematics. Well, mathematics, yes, but nothing to do with physics, as our system does. Physics of vibration of a string, that's the basis of our source. What they did, given here, those who can read it, but I'll explain. You know what geometric progression is? Many of you should. If you don't, then I'm shocked. Because you are at IIT. A geometric progression means a series of numbers of which each number bears a fixed ratio to the previous number. For example, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 80, no, I'm sorry, 128. So this is a geometric series. Okay, simple, geometric series. Each number is 2 times the previous number. What they did, they took the basic frequency of sa For simplicity, let's call it 1. And the upper Sa. And they said, or they thought, that all the frequencies in between would be a geometric progression going from 1:2, which means the ratio of that geometric progression would be the 12th root of 2. Clear? 12th root, which means what? Let's say this is a note and its frequency is x. That is 2. So if that note is 2, as I said here, I'll put it in logarithmic terms, log of 2, 12 times log of 2, because there are 12 notes, I'm going to take it. First of all, let me just write the equation. 2 is equal to x raised to 12. Is that clear enough? Simple. That means ratio of 2 to 1, and if there are 12 such members of the geometric series, 2 is equal to x raised to the power 12. If you take logs, log of 2 equal to 12 times log of x. And if you solve for x, you get this long number, 1.05, etc., etc., etc. That's on the screen. It's a very simple calculation. They did not bother about the frequencies of waves, frequencies of vibrating strings. They didn't bother. They wanted to make it very simple, keep it simple. Next note 2 is a ratio raised to the power 12, because there are 12 notes. So each note is that factor r, that is the 12th root of 2, multiplied by the previous note. Now what happens? When you do that, you get all the frequencies. But by this logic, they all form a geometric series, not our ratio system. So geometric system is not based on real physics. It is very artificially contrived. So just to make instrument makers' life easy. Okay, not the listener's life, but the instrument maker's life easy. Here is the comparison. Sorry, it's a little crowded, but Indian system versus Western scale. I'll just briefly talk about it. You may not be able to see this, but here is Sa. Sa is 1, upper Sa is 2, and upper Sa is 2. Now, our system, calculated by our way, the ratios 16 upon 15, 9 upon 8, 6 upon 5, 5 upon 4, Ma is 4 upon 3, Tivra Ma is 45 upon 32, believe it or not. Pa is 3.5, 3 times, 3 divided by 5, Dha is 8 upon 5, Shuddha Dha is 5 upon 3, Komalni is 16 upon 9, Shuddhani is 15 upon 9. All this can be calculated the way I showed you. And what happens here? These are decimal equivalents of these fractions, and these are their decimal equivalents. You see now the difference is very subtle. And let's take the example of Ga. By our system, it's 1.25, 5 upon 4. If Sa is 1, Ga would be 1.25. If their Sa is 1, their Ga would be 1.25992 something, not 1.25. And the same thing happens to all the notes. And these are only examples. If I started with a frequency of 240 for a Sa, 480 for the upper Sa, then these ratios will correspond to these, their ratios will correspond to these, which are slightly different. Not just the Gandhar note, but every note is different. Unscientific. This is why, to our ears, scale of Western music, instrument based on scale of Western music, if we use it in our system, it sounds not quite good. I mean, most people don't recognize it as Besura, but my guru Kishoritai, you know, she was a goddess of purity of notes. She would never have accepted this Western system, and never did, in fact. She, in her own singing, she is the only artist that I know who particularly brought the Shuddha Gandhar of ragas like Yaman to the exact position of Swayambhu Gandhar. No one else pays attention to this. That is why she was what she was. Now, briefly on the concept of Shrutis. Now, what happens, I give you two examples here. Shruti range for Ni and then Shruti range for Ga. By our ratio calculations, if Ma is Sa, then Ma of that Sa would be Ma times Ma, which is Komal Ni. For harmonium, you play Ma and then go to another Ma as if this is Sa. That next Ma would be actually the Ni of the first Sa, Komal Ni. And the same logic can be applied. If you take the Ga frequency, that is Komal Ga frequency, which is 6 divided by 5, and multiply that by the Pa frequency, which is 3 halves, you get 9 upon 5, which is 1.8. So calculating Ma times Ma as Komal Ni and calculating Komal Ga times Pa as Komal Ni gives you slightly different answers even in our system. But the important thing is that these ends 1.7777 versus 1.888. As engineers, you would say round of error. What's the problem? Okay? But in music, round of errors are not tolerated, at least by good musicians. Same way for Ga. Pa into Pa is Re of octave 2. Again multiplied by Pa would be Dha of octave 2. And then that becomes the Ga of octave 3. They are same logic. I'm not going to repeat this thing and show you, but believe me, you do this, you will get a Ga which is 81 upon 16. And doing another way, Ga of octave 1, therefore, coming back 2 octaves would be 81 upon 64. So that, by our other method, differs from 1.25 slightly, becomes 1.2656. So for each note you can show that approaching by the ratios of notes by different ways and you arrive at that same note, there is a slight difference in frequencies. And what that slight difference in frequency, each time you get these pairs of values which are slightly different from each other for each note's frequency. And here is Dr. Vidyadhar Oak has done a lot of research on this subject. I give him credit for this. Small r is the Komal variety, big R, Shuddha variety, Komal, Shuddha, etc. So you see that for each note, if you can make those calculations, for each note, you see that the value of, let's say, Komal Re 1.0535 versus 1.0666. This is what you might call Ati Komal Rishabh. Ati Komal Rishabh. If you use the normal Rishabh, that normal Komal Rishabh, not acceptable for Todi. Similarly, go to Gandhar, Komal Gandhar. 1.1851 is the lower range of the Shruti. 1.2 is the upper range of the Shruti. Here also, when you sing melodies like Todi, varieties of Todi, versus Multani, same notes but different Shrutis. So you might use this Shruti for one rag and this Shruti for another rag, but they can be all calculated mathematically what these Shrutis are. Okay, so we don't have time to go through all this, but believe me, this is the way frequencies are calculated for not only our notes, Shuddha notes, Komal notes, but also our Shrutis. Then what happens? There are two notes which are Achal notes. Sa is Achal, it doesn't have Shrutis, it's a single note. And Pa is Achal, Pa has never got Shrutis. But rest of them, how many are left? Out of the 12, 2 are Achal, we got 10 left. Each has two ends of the Shrutis. So that is 20 Shrutis. And Sa and Pa are two notes, that totally makes 22. That is the background of why we call 22 Shrutis. 3 ग्राम 22 श्रुति कर दिखाए, आए का लक्षात? That is where the 22 Shrutis come. This is another pictorial diagram of just to show you that Komal Re, Shuddha Re, it's got this range. Sa is Achal, only one. Komal Re has 2 Shrutis, Shuddha Re has 2 Shrutis, Komal Ga 2 Shrutis, Shuddha Ga 2 Shrutis, etc. So you got totally 22 Shrutis in these. Now you might wonder, what is in between here? The higher Shruti of Komal Ga and the lower Shruti of Shuddha Ga. So what is in between? It is actually no man's land. There is nothing in between. You don't sing that note. You can't sing that note. But to tell you again, of which I feel very proud, my Guru Kishori Tai particularly paid attention to the Shrutis of notes, all ragas, but one glaring example was her treatment of Bibhas, where she used to sing one of the notes of Bibhas, which is Dhaivat. The way she sang, it was neither Komal Dhaivat, no Shruti of the Komal Dhaivat, it was nor any Shruti of the Shuddha Dhaivat. It was in what we call, or what I call, no man's land. Here it is. See, in this Dhaivat, this is Komal Dhaivat, this is Shuddha Dhaivat. This is the range of frequencies of Komal Dhaivat, this is the range of frequency of Shuddha Dhaivat, Shrutis. Her Dhaivat of Bibhas was somewhere in this no man's land. If you measure it, that's exactly where it will be seen. Sorry, I missed. And that was her greatness, and consistently. It's not by fluke that sometimes she hit that particular in-between Shruti. She was consistent about it. Anytime you heard her Bibhas, that Dhaivat was there only. And that is why it used to sound so divine. Her son is here in the audience, and her granddaughter they are here in the audience. I'm very proud that they have come. But this is the greatness of Gana Saraswati Kishori Tai. And she spent a lot of chintan and manan and abhyas into looking at the Shrutis of our notes. I've done a mathematical and physics analysis of it because I just wanted to find out the very root of this. Where does it go? Where does it come from? And sure enough, it comes from all of this. Vibration of a string, that's the starting point. And you can derive all of this. Finally, this is another discovery of Dr. Vidyadhar Oak. Those of you who are into chemical engineering or chemistry are aware of the periodic table of elements. And the way the periodic table elements are classified into groups of 7, 7, 7, etc. What he did was, he created a similar periodic table of Shrutis of Indian music. And he arranged them by increasing Shrutis of the various notes and then juxtaposed those against the periodic table of chemical elements. And would you believe, he found a 99% match between the classification of notes of these Shrutis and the classification of elements by their atomic mass in the periodic table. I was stunned when I saw this. You can buy this book on Kindle, but the point is this. You can see how Mother Nature fundamentally, Mother Nature created elements of the universe, and Mother Nature also created the swaras of our music. And what a perfect match if you classify them. Well, with that note, I am going to conclude my talk. Thank you for attending.
Thank you. Really wonderful lecture. We started with maths, physics, finally ended with chemistry. Being a chemical engineer, I'm glad that he ended with chemistry. I think only biology is left. I think. So if you have any questions, please feel free.
I will take one. Friends, on behalf of the chair, I would like to present to Dr. Dravid
Hare?
something. This
My
is
goodness.
also
Thank you.
this is a book of photographs which has been published. It's a collection of photographs taken by our alumni. And this has been compiled as a tribute to the Alumni Association. This book is available. You can buy that from the BA. And so this is a tribute to Dr. Dravid.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Yeah.
Dr. Dravid, one quick question about the Western creation or Western demarcation of the Shrutis of the note. Now, the ratio that you got there is 12th root of 2.
Yes.
That is the irrational numbers.
Yes. Yes.
What that means is it can be multiplied by any harmonics.
Yes.
Harmonics have to be integer multiples of the fundamental frequency. So, how do they actually in fact play such notes on any?
Well, they don't worry about the fact that it is an irrational number. They just look, even the first 2 or 3 decimals.
Through approximation.
Yeah, through approximation. Even the first 3 decimals are different from our system.
So, the true note is in fact not even hearable by us because it is also
The note, in our system it is,
in our system it is, but in the
in their system it is not. Now, you may have noticed when I flashed the slide to say that our system has a name of natural system. Western system is called equitempered system. Ours is called natural, but it also is called Pythagorean system. Now you will wonder, what the hell did Pythagoras have to do with our system? Okay, even I wondered, why is our system called Pythagorean system? I thought Pythagoras only said that the diagonal is square and the side squared together are equal. But what happened was, when Pythagoras came to India on a travel centuries ago, thousands of years ago, maybe 1,500 years, he was very keen, a keen mathematician, by the way, and we all know that. Someone explained to him, when he came here, our Shastra, our system of how our notes are established. And he was so impressed. He said, you guys have gone 3-4 levels deeper than we ever did. And he went to Europe and he started talking about all over Europe. He started telling everybody, look at this scale in India, look at this scale and look at our scale. And he started talking like that so much that people there started calling our system as Pythagorean scale. And this is after Pythagoras was dead and gone. So poor fellow got an undue credit for the system our Rishi Munis invented. Anyway, this is just by the way. Thank you.
Assuming that there are no more questions, I cannot assume. Yeah, more. Last question.
Yes.
Hello, sir. Thank you very much for your very informative lecture. My name is Parth Sushi. So I had a question regarding the Swayambhu Gandhar. So you shared the experimental results of the investigation on playing all the 4 strings together, and then we get the Swayambhu Gandhar. So, but I wanted to understand like whether if we just play the individual strings at a time and then analyze the the composition of that. So can we also detect the presence of the Swayambhu Gandhar in that case?
Yes.
Let only the Kharja.
Yes. Absolutely. The answer is yes. And if you take a tanpura and tune it well and only play the Kharja last note, don't play the first 3 strings, and play it loudly and wait for 3-4 seconds, and you will hear at the end of it a shrill Gandhar coming from the 2nd octave. Likewise, and I have heard this myself, I'm sure most musicians, good musicians, know this. If you pluck the pancham, likewise in 3.5 seconds, just single strings are, the others are quiet, you will hear the ray of the shrill 2nd octave. So it is not as if because we play all 4, you are getting this. The others are coming out because the other strings interfere with each other. That's why he eliminated the bass spectrogram containing the sas and the kharjas and the purs. He eliminated those. This is only what he saw as strings which were not under tanpura, he measured. But yes, they do individually, if you play them, they will show up like this also.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so 2 more.
Yeah. One question here. As you rightly mentioned that during the tanpura up to a certain frequency, you can hear the Gandhar. But I'm just questioning myself like, how did the Rishi Munis maybe thousands of years back? How did they tune at particular frequency all these things?
See, now we are no witness of what happened at the time. I can only give you a speculative answer, and that is, in those days, it is not as if instruments were not around. There was music around. Look, Samaveda, or Vedic, any Veda. How is it Vedic mantras? You heard our priests chant Vedic mantras at the time of a munja, at the time of a lagna. Sa ni sa re sa ni sa ni re sa. Om bhur bhuvasvaha tat savitur varenyam bhargo devasya dhimahi dhiyo yo na prachodayat. Ni sa re ni sa re ni re sa. So our Vedic singing was confined to 3 notes only. And this was 4,000 years ago. Vedas are 4,000 years old. 2,000 years ago was Bharat Muni. And therefore, it is not that they didn't have instruments. Of course, they had ektaris. Of course, they had instruments with which they would sing. But he was the one who analyzed. And by the way, Bharata Muni's Natya Shastra is not just on music. It is on all performing arts. There are chapters on drama, music, Bharatanatyam, dance, music, drama. Bharata Muni had all performing arts covered in that volume. We are only talking about music here. But he was a versatile Muni who had a 6th vision. I am guessing that he could understand and analyze all of this. So it's a richness of our ancient music system.
Last.
So, sir, what determines the application of a particular Shruti in a rag? Like you mentioned, the Shrutita used to sing in that no man's land. So, what is the principle behind the application of a particular Shruti in a rag? Like,
You see that,
what is the rule that
yeah,
is it the aesthetics of the art form that determines the rules?
yes, it is the aesthetics of the art form. There is no hard and fast rule, but there are commonly known principles of certain ragas. For example, if you sing Marwa, the Komal Rishabh of Marga, or Todi, the Komal Rishabh of Marwa or of the rag Todi, they are traditionally known to be the lower Shruti of the Sur. There are certain ragas, for example, Darbari Kannada versus Adana. Now, Gandhar of the Darbari Kannada is an Ati Komal Gandhar. Nishad of the Darbari Kannada is a Chadha Nishad, what we call the higher Shruti of the Komal Nishad. Kaushi Kannada, I had no time, otherwise I would have played you a clip of my Guru Kishori Tai showing she has particularly showed in Kaushi Kannada how the Gandhar, when you apply the Malkau Sangha, uses one Shruti, and when you apply the Darbari Kannada Anga, you uses the other Shruti. In the single rag, the same note has 2 Shrutis depending on which raga of that combination you are showing. If we had more time, I would have played all of that for you.
Okay, so please join me in thanking Dr. Ravi for excellent lecture. And I also like to thank our first director,
Allowing me.
and our deputy director, Professor Kamath,
Yes.
for allowing you to,
Thank you.
do the music practice. Please
Oh,
accept this small gift from the institute.
thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So we'll have a small group photo.